Brett, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's get started with a quick introduction of yourself and your company, Kumospace.
I'm Brett Martin. I'm the president and co-founder of Kumospace, which is a maker of virtual offices for remote and distributed teams. We're also the creator of Fonzi, which is a AI personal recruiter. And I also run a venture capital fund called Charge Ventures, which does pre-seed, seed stage investing in New York City. And then finally, I also teach data analytics and machine learning at Columbia Business School.
Awesome, you got quite a few things going on. So in terms of your main company right now is Kumospace, correct?
Yeah, although Kumo Space has two products now. One is Kumo Space, which is a virtual office, and then the other thing is now we're launching a new AI recruiter that's helping people hire folks all over the world in a fraction of the time.
Awesome. Can we get into the current state of the company, how many employees you have, how long you guys have been in operations for?
Yeah, well, depends. We are. How many people do we have? Probably close to really only around 8 people full time at Kumo Space. Then we have a bunch of people that are kind of working remotely and working part time all over the world. Very much taking our own medicine when it comes to building lean teams and leveraging globalization whenever possible.
Awesome. And can you get into exactly what Kumospace does, what the product is?
Yeah, so Kumo Space kind of we call it a virtual office, and it's basically a virtual environment where your team sits and hangs out all day. So in the same way that you wake up and go to go to a physical office and kind of bump into your teammates as you were going to get breakfast, or go into a meeting room and have a meeting, or you could look at presentations and see what other people are working. Kumo Space provides the same, but virtually. So it's somewhere between video chat and Slack and a knowledge base, and all kind of wrapped into one coherent unit. So I guess you could also think of it as like Microsoft Teams, but with a little bit of a life.
Awesome. And how did you guys first come up with the idea for Kumospace?
So I was a VC going into just running my venture capital fund Charge full time until 2020, and you know, pandemic hit. I was on Zoom 8 hours a day, and I thought to myself, like, there has to be a better way. There has to be, Zoom cannot be the end of history for in terms of remote communications. And so I pinged my co-founder and multi-time co-founder Yang Mao, um, who I had worked on my prior projects with, and he had worked at Oscar and Google. And I said, hey, what if video chat was a little more like a video game? And he basically sent me a prototype 2 weeks later, and we were kind of off to the races.
Yeah, I found Kumo Space interesting as obviously I've worked in a remote environment basically since the pandemic. And we've used a lot of tools. I've used Loom, we use Slack in most of my communication. So, what I've been wondering with Kumo Space in terms of your marketing, because I heard on the last podcast you were on, one of your main channels is TikTok, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And the one thing I was wondering in terms of your guys' sales cycles, when you were attracting new customers to Kumo Space, I imagine that because people are already leveraging other tools, it could be a tough transition to get them to move off all of these current tools that they're using and get them onto your platform, which is sort of an all-in-one. So I'm wondering what kind of objections you guys face when talking to new potential customers, and then how you guys are able to deal with those deal with those objections.
Yeah, I like that. It's an excellent, sophisticated question, right? Which is, Kumo Space is a network-based product in the sense that it gets better the more people that are on it. right? And so it doesn't work great if, part of your team, it doesn't work as well if like part of your team's on it, the other part isn't. And so then, how do you distribute, can it be a truly a PLG product if you really need the rest of your team using it? Um, I think it's actually a good question. Kumo Space works best. Honestly, it's like a real office. Like, you know, most people are probably not going to go to a physical office unless the boss tells them to. And I think Kumo Space works somewhat similarly in the sense that it really only works best if, there's a top-down mandate and, the boss says, hey, we're all going to show up in Kumo Space every day. This is how we're going to work. Um, and so, there is, a fair degree of like change management associated with using Kumo Space. Like it's not just like, oh, it just bubbles up, and all of a sudden the whole organization is using it. I mean, honestly, that was what we had hoped would happen, but that wasn't how it actually played out. And so, really it's more like what I would call a product assist motion, or sales assist motion, however you want to look at it, where people discover the product organically, can try it out organically in small teams, and then ultimately, you know, have to sell it into their through, up into their organization so that it can be distributed back down. And, we just try to get in front of the champions and the evangelizers and try to ultimately like, champion um, focus selling where we get there and we really support them to help them sell it into their own organization. So that's, several years of learning compressed, wishful thinking for product led, fully product led growth, and then realizing, hey, the product can get us in the door, but then we need to help the champion sell it.
So usually you've found that a small team within an organization will start using it. And that will kind of begin the conversation towards their, I guess, the decision makers when it comes to that, when it comes to fully adopting it.
Yeah, most of our customers, like we have had very large customers. Google used us for one of their large, developer conferences for their largest developer conference. We had PwC, big four like accounting firm use us. But the majority of customers are SMEs, maybe a few hundred people. And yeah, maybe a small team uses it first, or, oftentimes it is the boss or at least, executive that is saying, hey, like, I know we're not as productive as we could be as a fully remote distributed team. We're just like, you know, different constituencies we have different value propositions for different constituencies. Like I would say for leadership, it's visibility, right? Where's my team? What are they doing? What's everyone working on? Um, then I would say there's, you know, collaboration, right? Which is like, hey, I'm trying to get stuff done and I, need to get unblocked. Like, how do I get in touch with people quickly? And that's sort of for more upwardly mobile people in an organization and managers. And then there's like culture, which is like, hey, I'm trying to build a distinct and useful culture, but I'm doing it remotely. Like, I don't have enough surface area to connect on. And so, that's more like HR and remote work specialists. So we appeal to three different constituencies, three different value propositions. They all kind of work together. And, our sales process depends on like who found us, and then how do we go from there, um, to sell in through the execs.
So I believe you mentioned that Kumospace has 8 people, correct?
8 full-time employees, and then we have a
Okay.
bunch of contractors. Yeah.
So the reason I'm asking is because people are, well, I guess the competitors, I know Kumospace sort of has their own unique market, let's say, because you're combining various tools into one. But people would move over to Kumospace from tools like Slack and Zoom, as an example, right?
Yeah. Some people, definitely people use this as their primary video chat. Sometimes they'll keep a Zoom for like their salespeople who are, selling. A lot of people don't. And then same thing with Slack. Some smaller teams tend to use us as their all-in-one communication suite. And then if you're in a large organization that already is like fully committed to Slack, like again, good luck ripping that out. And so they'll use us alongside chat. I think you have to kind of be somewhat humble in your ambitions when you're like dancing around with these giants, and you got to figure out how to play nice.
Yeah, that's why I was leading to, because I know, as you said, they're giants. So they have a lot of features that they use, and they obviously have very large teams that are building out these features. So what I'm trying to understand from Kumospace's perspective, because you guys are, in terms of people, a smaller company than Zoom or Slack, which has a lot of features they're pushing out. So have you guys been able to zoom in on a certain feature set that your users really focus on, and been able to do
Yeah,
that
I
with
mean,
a smaller team? Yeah.
I think the virtual office is the like unique feature for remote and distributed teams, right? Like everyone has video chat, everyone has, chat. But those places don't have they're not built around like a virtual office, which is it's hard to describe. That's why TikTok's a great marketing channel for us, is because you can see it. But it's
Yeah.
sort of like an always on video or audio channel that people can move and have different conversations in different places. So you're always kind of always in a persistent Slack huddle that may or may not have a video component. Um, and that is the core. And I think that is like a pretty specific feature that really appeals to remote first teams. Like both Slack and Zoom were created remote first operating. And so they don't have that. And so that appeals to that ends up having we do have actually like at ICP, I think like 45% of our customers are marketing agencies. Um, and that has to do with marketing agencies are uh, they tend to be distributed, they tend to be smaller teams, they tend to like they need to collaborate. They have to constantly form new groups based around new projects and move between groups and iterate quickly. And getting stuff done quickly for the client is like of the utmost importance. And they work hard, and they probably need to create great cultures to keep people because they're not paying great. And so that is, I think, all the reasons why like, Kumo Space might appeal to that customer group.
So when you guys first started building Kumo Space, what sort of marketing and sales strategies did you guys implement to get your first initial customers?
Oh my God. Um, well, I think like we launched during the pandemic. Um, so everyone was running around looking for some sort of solution to, people had never worked without offices before. And so they definitely felt the, um, they felt the need for something, but they couldn't really articulate like, and people still have a hard time articulating, why we're going back to the office, right? It's something that people really never figured out actually how to
Hmm.
articulate, but they did decide it's important, which is why a lot of people are returning to the office. But at the time when we launched, everyone knew something was missing and was trying to solve the problem. So um, we just put it out there and it grew organically. I mean, it's nice that it has like an inherent um, organic, like viral
Yeah.
component, right? And so, it just started to grow. Now, of course, we then tried a dozen different marketing techniques, right? We tried influencer, we tried organic social, we tried email, we tried BD, we tried direct sales, we tried cold emailing. I think marketing is throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about with how you guys started and how you guys ended up deciding on what marketing channels you're using now. Because when I think of a product like this, is some people might not be aware that there's an option like this out there, or that there's a problem. You just get used to using tools such as Zoom and Slack, and you've accepted what remote culture is in this new day and age. And I was imagining, if you guys, like for example, in cold email, you may have to educate the person on sort of the problem and then try to sell it to them after, where they might not even know that there's another option available to solve this problem.
There's definitely a degree of category creation in the virtual office space. And honestly, like when we started, there was no one. It pretty quickly it got crowded. I think there was like 40 different companies that launched, 40, 50 different companies that launched similar competing products. And now most of them have died. So, you know, I think that like we sort of realized that, particularly when the pandemic ended, people started going back to the office. That was what the easiest thing was for a lot of leaders. But remote work is now a 10x, 20x larger category than it was pre-pandemic, and it will continue to grow slowly over time, just like it was before the pandemic. And so I think when we had to, that's part of why we didn't over scale the company. We didn't like hire a gazillion people, is because we kind of realized like this was going to be a long haul.
So I've heard you mention on other calls product channel fit. And my understanding is this is identifying what marketing channel or sales channel is best for your specific product. Can you expand on that idea and yeah, what you've learned about yeah, product channel fit?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll step back out and I'll sort of define what I think is like the ideal uh, go-to-market motion,
Okay.
right? And this is probably one of the most poorly poorly understood, I would say, pieces of a sort of pitch. And I look at a number being a VC, right? But I think a really good go-to-market is really simple. It's one, um, how is your product the best in the world at serving some small, very specific niche of customers, right? And so the secret to being really good as a startup is um, just keep niching down until you get so specific about your customers that you can build such esoteric features that no one else has them. And so therefore you become the only game in town that delivers, the specific set of value of specific set of features from a specific features to a specific customer, right? So that's the first part, that's product. Then
Mhm.
it's messaging. So now that you've built this like very kind of esoteric product that solves a very small niche his needs, how do you like market that? How do you message, you know, that value proposition, right? So now you've got the perfect product and the perfect messaging. And then the third component, it gets to your question, which is like, okay, now what is the perfect channel to deliver that message and that product through? Right. And so I think a really like nice example is have you ever gone to New York or gone to a Broadway show?
I've been to New York, but I did not go to a Broadway show.
Okay, well, I don't know if you've ever gone to a play, but they give you this little pamphlet. It's called a playbill. And it basically is like this little pamphlet that tells you about the show that you're watching, and
Mhm.
there's advertisements in it, right? And
Okay.
so um if you go to the symphony or something up in Lincoln Center in Upper West Side in New York, they'll give you one of these playbills as well, and it'll tell you about the symphony, tell you about the composer and all this other stuff, and then there'll be ads. And so I remember I was at the Philharmonic in New York once, and I was flipping through the playbill and learning, and I saw an ad for a um, hearing aid, right? And I was like, this is actually perfect product product messaging channel fit, because who goes to the um, symphony? People who care about sound. The people who go
Mm.
to symphony are also wealthy, right? And so you've got a group of, and they're also aging generally. The people who are going to symphony are like, tend to have gray hair, right? So you've got a bunch of people who really care about sound, who have lots of money, and they're losing their hearing, right? And so what better place is there to sell a hearing aid than in that pamphlet? And so that is in my opinion, like a perfect product, channel fit. Because whenever you're doing advertising, the problem is, in traditional advertising, with online you can do targeting and things like that. But in traditional advertising, you're saying, hey, like, my message, this billboard is going to get in front of 100 people, but how many of them are actually a good fit for my product? And in this case, it's almost 100% of the people reading the playbill are a good fit for a hearing aid. And so, yeah, that would be my example for product channel fit.
I like that. So it's something that you really have to exercise your creativity and understand who your target market is in order to arrive there. Like in that example, it's not something that you're going to typically think could be the right place for a hearing aid at a Broadway show. But then when you start piecing together all of those pieces, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's I think everyone, younger people, it's all targeting and online targeting, and that's one of the reasons that Google's one of the biggest companies in the world is it can only advertise to people that are presumably relevant. But for all the other channels, we still have to think about this stuff about who's is this the right place to put my message.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to transition to your AI recruiting company and talk about that. And then let's see, I would love to know, based on what you've just told me, how you're applying that sort of thinking to this new product that you guys are launching. So, can you dive into the AI recruiting company and why you think that's a problem that should be solved?
Yeah, recruiting is something that every founder has the problem of recruiting is something every founder has dealt with, but very few, I think, ever truly master. And I think it's one of these things where you know recruiting is a means to an end, and so people don't really like spending time on it because it's one of those things where it's a ton of work and it's a complete waste of time until it's not. Meaning, every email that you send to a potential recruit is useless until they respond, and every call you have with someone is useless unless it's the person that you actually try to hire. And even if you want to hire them, if they then don't accept the offer, then it's still all useless, right? So it's pretty demoralizing, um, and so people don't like to do it because they like dopamine hits. And so, um, when we were thinking about, like, I think a broader context, just to tie these two things together, is that we hear a lot about like great entrepreneurs, and everyone's talking about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Elon, right? Um, but every great entrepreneur rides a massive wave. And so,
Mm,
whether you're Steve Jobs and you're writing the, mobile revolution, or you're Bill Gates and you're writing the personal computing, wave, or you're Elon and you're writing the, electrification, wave, right? Like, those things don't happen. A great entrepreneur on a terrible market, to Mark Andreessen's point, will fail, right? And so, with us, like, remote work, we think is a real thing, and we think it's going to continue to be a real thing. But the wave sort of definitely died down post, COVID, and there's a lot of headwinds in that market. And so, while we think it will be a big thing, over time, and more, or any work that can be done remotely will be done, it's not happening overnight. And
mhm.
AI is obviously kind of like the next is the wave that's happening right now. There's a lot of momentum behind it, and so I think as founders, we were like, hey, like, how do we ride the wave? And so when we looked around, this sort of talent, because we do remote, we already were thinking a lot about humans and culture and teams and how to hire remotely. We had done a gazillion presentations on that, and so we said, okay, well, how can AI, um, how will AI change this? And I think it's like actually a pretty interesting place, because if you look at a lot of the work of a uh, recruiter, right? Like, if you talk to any recruiters, and we talked to dozens of them, um, you know, they love spending time with humans, but they hate all this kind of rote work, right? This like emailing 1,000 people and writing 1,000 cold emails, and then having kind of a robotic first phone screen, with 100 candidates like that. But they don't like that. They like spending time with the best candidates. They like prepping them and getting them excited and really, selling to the company about why they're great. And so our thesis was, hey, like, how can we create technology that enables the best human recruiters to, basically spend their time doing the stuff that they love and is really valuable. And that was the genesis of Fonzi.
And how's it going so far? Do you guys have a product that is out there that people are using, or what stage exactly are you guys at?
Yeah, you can check it out. Check out Fonzi.ai. And if you just want to play with it, you can go to Fonzi.ai/candidates. You can click on it there, and you can actually upload a, JD and upload your resume, and Fonzi will interview you for whatever job you want. And you can see it'll give you feedback on how you did and how you can improve your interviewing. That's our candidate-facing tool, and then we have a related tool for companies that want to interview for specific things.
Okay. When you guys see the future of remote work, obviously nowadays with the ability to work from anywhere, but also connect from people from all over the world, there's a lot of jobs going offshore. So when it comes to running people through the AI recruitment tool, are you guys focusing on a specific market, like for example, remote work within the United States or Canada? Or is this a global tool that you intend to use to connect American companies with developers or job seekers in other parts of the world?
Yeah. So when we talked to a bunch of folks about hiring, a recurring theme is that actually, because of the software job market and because of AI, because candidates have actually adopted AI very quickly, there's a problem right now, which is that anytime anyone posts a job opening, they actually get flooded with candidates because candidates are now applying with AI to thousands and thousands of jobs. They're looking at, without even looking at the job, and things like easy apply on LinkedIn make it so easy to apply. So what we had heard over and over was that people were um, posting a job and then getting 1,000 applicants in less than 24 hours, and so actually they couldn't even um, they actually put down the job posting and they don't even use the channel because it's just too hard to find signal in the noise. And so
Yeah.
that we realized, oh wow, actually an AI interview is perfect because it's only serious people will spend the time to do it, and you get way more information, and it helps you find people that you might not have found if you just looked at their resume.
Interesting. Brett, as we start to wind down here, I'd love to ask you some general questions about your experience in entrepreneurship and what advice you would give for people who want to follow a path similar to yours. So, in your career, what do you think has been, I guess, let's talk about mindsets. So, what do you think has been an important mindset or important trait that you've had that's led you to your success?
I think you know in my first company, I had I definitely remember one time, it was New Year's Eve. I went with my buddies. We went to Punta del Este in Uruguay. Um, and we were cheersing, and I had had a terrible year. My company had kind of blown up, and there was like a thing with the board, and I had spent basically like 3 months fundraising 25K every 2 weeks just to keep the company alive. And you know, I made cheers and I said, okay, I'm never gonna give up. I'm gonna just be persistent. Um, and I think, eventually I found out I had an opportunity to do, found out around fundraising, and ultimately, it didn't go forward. And I was really down after that. And, then I started a new company, and, whatever, the rest is history. But I realized that actually, persistence is important, but maybe resilience is even more important as a founder, in the sense that, like, you're going to lose. Like, you will you will get knocked down. And the most important thing is actually to bounce back and take more shots on goal. And if you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, honestly, their hit rate isn't 1,000%. They actually fail all the time, but what they are really good is they get lots of shots on goal. And so I would say, resilience and trying to, take as many shots on goal, it's the same thing for great artists, right? They're mostly prolific. And I think same with great entrepreneurs.
So, what could somebody do to maximize the amount of shots they take on goal?
Fucking ship it. Get like get work out the door. I think a lot of people, perfect is the enemy of good, and they don't get a lot. They never launch because they're afraid of what they're doing. So yeah, just ship it.
Awesome. And Brett, if people want to find you online and want to learn more about you, where can they go to find you?
Yeah, just probably hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn. Twitter is Brett1211, and LinkedIn just reference this podcast.
Awesome. Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Marcus, thanks for having me. It's great talking to you. Great questions.